So, I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, unless you're driving, obviously.
Yeah.
But I want you to picture the most valuable thing you own. Maybe it's your house, your car, maybe a family heirloom.
Right, something irreplaceable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I want you to strip all of that away. I want you to imagine a world where the absolute most precious object in your life, the one thing that separates you from like total destitution, is a rusty sewing needle found stuck in the bottom of a fertilizer bag.
And let's actually raise the stakes on that. Imagine a world where a scrap of cloth, even if it's completely covered in filth and cow dung on the side of the road, is something that grown men will physically fight over, because it literally means the difference between freezing to death or seeing another sunrise.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're pitching a post-apocalyptic movie script to you right now, doesn't it? But we aren't. Welcome to today's Deep Dive. I'm your host, and with me, as always, is our resident expert to help unpack this.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here for this one. It's a heady topic today.
It really is. We are doing a deep dive into a very real, very intense slice of history. We're unpacking Chapter 10 of the autobiography called Faith and Survival in Heungnam Prison, written by Reverend Son Myung Moon.
And just to set the geographical stage here for you, we are looking at a forced labor camp in North Korea, specifically the Heungnam fertilizer factory. This spans from the late 1940s right into the absolute chaos of the Korean War.
Right. Now, before you start thinking, oh boy, another depressing history lesson about how war is terrible, let me stop you right there. The mission for this deep dive is a little different.
Yeah, we aren't just cataloging suffering here.
No, exactly. We're trying to extract the, I guess you could call the operating system of survival. We have a ton of historical accounts of physical hardship, sure, but this source is unique. It details the specific mental and spiritual algorithms the author used to survive conditions that killed almost everyone else around him.
It's really a case study in human agency, because when a totalitarian state takes away your clothes, your food, your name, and your future, where do you find power? How do you retain your humanity when you are living in, quite literally, a pile of toxic fertilizer?
Before we jump all the way in, I do want to add a quick note for you listening. Because this source contains some politically and religiously charged content involving communism and specific religious ideologies, we just want to be clear. We are absolutely not taking any sides here, left-wing or right-wing. We are just impartially reporting on the content provided in the text and exploring these ideas.
Right. Our goal is just to analyze the survival mechanics described in the source material. Nothing more, nothing less.
Exactly. So let's get right into the setting. Yeah. Because the physical reality here is totally crucial to understanding the psychology. This wasn't a standard prison with iron bars on a cot.
No, it was a chemical factory.
A very toxic one.
Extremely. The prisoners were tasked with bagging ammonium sulfate fertilizer. And this isn't just heavy lifting. It's basically chemical warfare on the human body. The source describes the ammonia fumes as just constant. They would literally eat through the prisoner's skin, causing these awful weeping sores. But more immediately, the ammonia ate through their clothes.
That's the detail that really stuck with me. The chemicals were so corrosive that eventually the prisoners just looked like beggars in rags. Their clothes just disintegrated right off their bodies.
Which brings us back to your opening hook, the needle.
The rusty needle. In the text, the author recounts carrying these massive bags of fertilizer, and by sheer luck, or, providence, depending on how you view it, he finds a needle stuck in one of the bags. It was probably just a factory accident, like a leftover from the manufacturing process.
But in that context, in that camp, that needle is a massive game changer. It's high technology.
It really is. He essentially becomes the camp seamster. He starts mending trousers and knee breeches for the other prisoners. But here's where it gets interesting to me. He didn't just mend them for utility. There was this heavy emphasis in the text on the dignity of dress.
And that is a crucial psychological insight right there. You have to remember, inside this factory in the summer, it was boiling hot. You have the chemical heat reacting with the summer heat. Most prisoners strip down to their underwear just to survive the temperature.
Which makes total biological sense. You want to cool the body down.
Exactly. But the author refused. He kept his trousers on, tied at the ankles in the traditional Korean fashion. He was sweating. He's absolutely miserable, but he wouldn't strip down.
Because once you strip down, you start to look like an animal.
Right. And once you look like an animal, it's easier for the guards to treat you like one. And more importantly, it's easier for you to start viewing yourself as one. By maintaining that modesty, even at the cost of physical suffering, he was drawing a line in the sand. He was saying, I'm still a civilized man. I still follow the rules of society, even if society has completely abandoned me.
He takes this civilized man concept to a level that honestly sounds a bit obsessive when it comes to hygiene. The source mentions that water was strictly rationed. I mean, this is a starvation camp.
Yeah, calories and water are the only currency that matters in a place like that.
Yet he takes his daily ration of water, which is barely enough to keep his kidneys functioning, and he saves half of it. He wakes up before dawn while everyone else is asleep and uses a wet cloth to wipe his body down.
Think about the sheer discipline that requires. You're severely dehydrated. Your body is screaming for that water. But he uses it to clean the fertilizer dust off his skin instead.
It's a ritual.
It is. He used that time to pray. It's a way of reclaiming his timeline. The guards own his day, right?
Yeah.
They own his labor from sunrise to sunset. But they don't own that pre-dawn hour. That hour belongs to him.
It's the difference between being a victim of the schedule and being the master of it. But speaking of where he slept and woke up, we have to talk about the sleeping arrangements. This is the part of the text that really stopped me in my tracks. It forces you to completely rethink the politics of space.
Oh, the cell dynamics. This is fascinating. So picture this. You have 36 men crammed into a small room, and in the corner there is the toilet.
Which, let's be totally clear, is just an earthenware jar.
An uncovered jar. In the summer, it overflows. In the winter, the waste freezes solid. It smells horrific. And naturally, the area around that jar is the worst real estate in the entire cell. You get splashed, people step on you in the pitch dark to use it, and you are sleeping right next to men who are sick with dysentery.
Right, so in any standard prison hierarchy, or heck, even in a corporate office, the alpha moves as far away from the bathroom as possible. The strongest guys take the spots near the walls or the door. The weakest get shoved next to the waist.
That is the standard dominance hierarchy, yes, but the author, he walks in and voluntarily chooses the spot right next to the jar. He claims it was where his, quote, heart felt most at ease.
Okay, unpack that for me, because to the average listener, that just sounds like madness.
Yeah.
How does sleeping next to raw sewage put your heart at ease?
It's actually a brilliant, if extreme, survival strategy. Think about the energy the other prisoners spend fighting for the good spots. The politics, the bickering, the stress of constantly defending your territory against someone who wants to take it from you.
It's constant low-level conflict. You're always looking over your shoulder.
Exactly. By taking the absolute bottom spot, the place literally no one else wants, he removes himself from the competition entirely. No one is ever going to fight him for the toilet spot. He effectively opts out of the prison hierarchy. He found peace by accepting the lowest position, which meant no one could force him lower.
That's incredibly stoic. He who is down need fear no fall.
And it also allowed him to reframe the suffering. He talks about trying to perceive the sounds of sick men using the jar not as disgusting noise, but as a form of music or an undeniable proof of humanity. He's actively editing his own perception of reality to keep from going insane.
He did a similar thing with his prisoner number 2, didn't he? Number 596.
Yes, this is a bit of wordplay that only really works in Korean. The pronunciation of 596 is oguriduk. If you say it fast, it sounds very similar to the word iogul, which translates to injustice or resentment.
So every time the guards called his number to degrade him, they were accidentally validating his feelings.
In his mind, yes. He used it as a personal mantra. On those sleepless nights, he would repeat it. It reinforced his internal narrative, I am here unjustly, I am innocent. It prevented him from internalizing the criminal label that the state was trying to put on him.
But the state wanted way more than just labor from these guys. They wanted ideological submission. The source talks about these gratitude letters that prisoners were forced to write to Kim Il-sung.
Yeah, this was standard re-education protocol. You had to write letters thanking the great leader for the food, which was garbage, and for the work and for the wonderful life you had under communism. For a religious leader like Moon, this was a hard line. He viewed it as lying and bowing to a false god.
But this is a North Korean labor camp. You can't just say, no thanks, I'll pass on the homework.
Yeah.
That gets you executed, or at least beaten half to death.
Exactly. So he engages in this fascinating paradox. He refuses to write the letters. The text says he never wrote a single one, but he protects himself from punishment by becoming the best prisoner.
Subversive compliance.
That is the perfect term for it. He worked 10 times harder than anyone else. He hit production quotas that seemed physically impossible. He actually ended up winning an award from a communist official for his labor output.
So he put the guards in a bind. Ideally, they want to punish him for not writing the letters, but pragmatically they need him because he's their star worker and he helps them meet their own quotas.
He essentially bought his spiritual freedom with his physical sweat. He realized that even in a totally rigid totalitarian system, utility has value. If you make yourself indispensable, you get a little bit of wiggle room to hold on to your soul.
That is a compelling strategy, but it comes with a massive cost. And this leads us to what I think is the most difficult part of the source material to digest. The text takes a very sharp turn when it discusses his family. We have to talk about the mother's visit.
This is definitely the emotional crater of the story. It really challenges our modern and frankly Western idea of what goodness looks like.
Set the scene for us.
So his mother travels over 20 hours to see him. She takes 2 different trains. She has gone into serious debt to buy misutkaru, which is powdered rice. And she brings his silk wedding trousers because she's heard rumors that he looks like a walking skeleton. She arrives at the prison, weeping, and hands these precious items to him.
I mean, any of us would grab that food. We'd hug our mom. We'd cry with her. It's the most natural human reaction imaginable.
But instead, the author takes the food and the clothes, turns around, and immediately hands them out to other prisoners right in front of her.
That is just, it's brutal.
And he doesn't stop there. He actually scolds her. He tells her, "Mother, I am not just the son of some man named Moon. I am a son of the world." He basically reprimands her for being small-minded and emotional in the face of his larger mission.
I think for a lot of you listening, that pushes the boundary between saint and sociopath. It feels incredibly cold. Why did he do that? Was it just a performance for the other guys?
We really have to look at his hierarchy of values here. This is an extreme form of compartmentalization. In his mind, his mission, the work of God, and the brotherhood he was building in the prison, sat higher on the pyramid than his biological family.
So feeding a stranger in his cell was a higher moral act than comforting his own mother.
To him, yes. He writes that it felt like his heart was being torn apart. He claims he deeply felt the pain. But he believed that if he succumbed to personal emotion, if he acted like a mama's boy right then, he would lose the spiritual authority he had painstakingly built up with the other prisoners. He was leading them. And to lead them, he felt he had to show total detachment from his own personal needs.
He was building a brotherhood. The source mentions he had 12 men, the 12 disciples of prison, who were closer to him than blood relatives.
Trauma bonding is very real. In combat or in prison, the men suffering next to you become your primary reality. They shared a daily hell that his mother simply couldn't ever understand.
And that hell was about to get a lot hotter. June 1950. The Korean War officially starts.
And Heungnam is a major industrial target. The UN forces land at Incheon, pushing north. And suddenly, the B-29 bombers start appearing right over the camp.
The description of the bombing runs is just chaotic. The guards run to the bunkers to save themselves, leaving the prisoners completely exposed in the factory. And this is where we get the 12 meters story.
Right. The author describes having a premonition, a spiritual vision of a tearful Jesus. He immediately shouts to his followers, "Stay within 12 meters of me."
And according to the account, a bomb lands exactly outside that radius.
Whether you view that as divine intervention, a wild coincidence, or heightened survival instincts, subconsciously tracking the plane's trajectory, the result was that it permanently cemented his leadership. The prisoners saw him as a literal shield.
But the bombs weren't the only threat. As the UN forces got closer, the communist guards started cleaning house. They started executing prisoners.
They started with the longest sentences. They'd call names, march them into the mountains, make them dig their own graves, and shoot them. The author knew he was next in line. He was actually scheduled for execution on October 14th.
But on the night of October 13th?
The night of fire. The bombing was so intense that the prison walls literally crumbled. The guards fled for their lives.
It's a completely cinematic moment. At 2 a.m., the author just walks out.
After 2 years and 8 months of hell, he walks out with dignity into a burning city. And here is where that operating system we talked about kicks in yet again. A normal person runs home. A normal person finds safety.
He heads to Pyongyang. He heads north, deeper into the active war zone.
Because he felt a responsibility to find his congregation. The people he was separated from when he was arrested years earlier, he simply couldn't leave without them.
The trek is grueling. He's walking with a group of his prison disciples. And as he walks, he makes some pretty fascinating observations about the infrastructure around him.
He notices the roads. He realizes the roads in North Korea were built wide enough for tanks long before the war even started. And he realizes the fertilizer he had been bagging for years, that supposed agricultural work, was actually being traded to the Soviet Union for weapons.
That has to be a massive gut punch. Realizing your slave labor literally fueled the war that is now destroying your entire country.
It adds a really heavy layer of bitter irony to the whole experience. He was a cog in the machine of his own destruction.
So he spends 40 days searching Pyongyang. He finds a few followers, but then the Chinese army enters the war, the tide turns again, and they have to flee south. This is the refugee trek.
And this is where we see the logic of the mother's visit applied to a stranger. We have to talk about Mr. Pak.
Mr. Pak, the man with the broken leg.
Right. Mr. Pak was a follower who had been left behind. His family had fled. He couldn't walk. Now, in a refugee situation, taking a man with a broken leg is basically suicide. You move too slow, you get caught, you die.
But the author absolutely refuses to leave him.
He puts Mr. Pak on the frame of a bicycle and pushes him over frozen rice paddies. The author writes that he sometimes carried him on his back. Mr. Pak actually tried to commit suicide repeatedly because he knew he was a burden and was endangering the whole group.
But the author wouldn't let him. It's that same value system from the prison. The group, the brotherhood, matters more than efficiency. It matters more than safety.
And more than logic. It was completely irrational to save Mr. Pak, but it was entirely consistent with the author's spiritual logic. If he abandoned a disciple, his entire theology of true love would collapse on itself.
They are starving during this trek. They are eating frozen potatoes and barley cakes scavenged from empty houses. And yet, the author claims that food tasted better than a king's meal.
Blessed are the poor. He's reframing again, finding gratitude in the absolute nadir of existence. He implies that hunger is the best seasoning, and that suffering creates a depth of taste that comfort can never, ever provide.
They finally reach the Imjin River. This is the final barrier between the North and the South.
The river is frozen, but it's incredibly treacherous. He describes practically dragging another companion, One Pill Kim, who is literally falling asleep while walking. He pushes them relentlessly.
He says, salvation is just beyond the next obstacle.
And the timing was impeccable. They crossed the frozen river, and moments later, the UN forces closed the crossing. If they had been 10 minutes later, if he hadn't pushed his companion so hard, they would have been trapped in the North forever.
The deep dive ends with him standing at the 38th parallel. 1 foot in the south, 1 foot in the north.
It's a really powerful visual to close the chapter. He makes a final vow to return, liberate the North, and unify the country. It closes the loop perfectly. He started in a prison cell, sitting next to a toilet jar to find spiritual peace, and ends up standing on the border of a divided nation. And even then, he's still focused on this massive, almost impossible mission, rather than just enjoying his own safety.
So when we step back and look at this deep dive, what is the core takeaway for you? We've gone from a rusty needle to a frozen river.
I think the core insight is that survival isn't just about physical endurance, it's about definition. The author survived because he aggressively defined his own reality.
He defined the needle as an asset. He defined the toilet spot as a sanctuary. He defined his labor as a shield.
Exactly. He refused to let the environment dictate who he was. And he had a hierarchy of values, God and mission above absolutely everything else, that allowed him to endure suffering that would break a person operating on standard logic.
Which really forces us to ask a provocative question about freedom.
Right. Was he more free when he refused to write those letters in prison than the guards who were forcing him to do it?
And on the flip side, is that level of conviction something we should admire, or is there something slightly terrifying about it? When you look at the scene with his mother, when you sacrifice the human connection right in front of you for a higher purpose, do you lose a part of your humanity in the process?
That is the line between faith and fanaticism, and it's a very thin, very blurry line.
We'll leave that for you to mull over and decide where that line is drawn. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the psychology of Heungnam Prison.
See you next time.